Welcome, OddOne. So today we're going to focus on essay types. Now, as you can remember, I told you that task 2 is the same for general as well as academic students, right? So maybe the question style could be a little different when you write, but apart from that, you get an essay question and that is common for both types of categories, right? So even if you're an academic student, even if you're a general student, you will still get an essay question, right? So it is important for you to understand what types of essay questions could actually come. Right, so let us have a look at the different types of essays. Now, after we have a look at the different types of essays, then we can have a look at how to approach these different types of essays. But before we start, we need to know exactly what are the types of essays, right? Now, the aim of this lesson is to help you to highlight the topic areas of especially IELTS Task 2. And this will also help you to kind of practice and brainstorm and build ideas. It's just a quick insight, but you could kind of practice more. To help you learn topic-related vocabulary, collocations, and develop accuracy. So I'm not going to do a lot of collocations, but this will kind of help you to go through and kind of refresh yourself with collocations and vocab, right? Alright, so the practice questions taken out would be from the LIS IELTS essay topics. Right, so topic areas which the IELTS Task 2 questions are usually formed would be a vast range of topics, right? So some of the topics, as you can see here, would be on advertising, animals, art, buildings and housing, business, character and people. So you're not going to get a specific topic like, write an essay about animals, no, right? But it could be something related to animals. So that's what I want to put down. These are just areas, they're not essay questions, okay? Crime and punishment, economy and money. We've got education, we've got environment, we've got family, we've got food, health, internet and computers, language, and then there's leisure, media and television, music, news, reading books, society, space, exploration, sport and exercise, technology, tourism, transport, water, work, and world issues, right? So these are some of the areas that could actually come, right? And there could be more. So, but these are quite common, right? And it would be good for you to go through some essay topics related around these areas. Alright, so there are 5 main types of essays when it comes to the IELTS Task 2. So the first one, we call it opinion essays. Some teachers actually call it argumentative essays. Right, so it could be named in either way. So some call it opinion essays, some call it argumentative essays. The next type would be discussion essays. The next one, problem solution essays. Then you have advantage and disadvantage essays, and then you have double question essays. Some people actually call them direct question essays. So under this specific essay, there are different types of essays. Now, opinion essays or argumentative essays are the main type, okay? So under this, there are a few types of essays. Now, example, do you agree? Okay. The next one could be, do you agree or disagree? Then there's another specific type, to what extent do you agree? Then there's another type, what is your opinion? Right? So these are the different types of opinion essays, right? Now they could ask you, give you an essay topic and ask you, do you agree? Okay, so example, the internet does more harm than good. Do you agree? Okay, or the internet does more harm than good. To what extent do you agree? Okay, or they could give you some two options and then say discuss both views and give your opinion. Okay, or what is your opinion about it, right? So these type of questions, they ask you for your personalized view. Okay, you could agree, you could disagree. Now, should euthanasia be legalized in all countries? Okay, so when they say so basically euthanasia means by your own will you can ask the doctors if you're sick. If you have something like example cancer, you can ask them to give you medicine and you can kill your own self. Now in Sri Lanka, it's banned. You can't do that, okay? But in other countries, or there are a few countries which it is being legalized, right? So euthanasia should be legalized in all the countries. Now some of you can agree and say yes, it's good because of these reasons. Some of you can say, no, I strongly disagree because of these reasons. So it depends on your view, okay? And it is personalized. But whichever view you take, you can say, I agree completely, I disagree completely. Whichever view you take, right, you have to back up by giving examples and why you're saying so. Now, sometimes you could even say 50-50. Now, for example, there would be questions like, Facebook is bad for individuals as well as the society. Okay, now just a quick idea of the essay question. Now, sometimes you can say, well, I think it is good for the individuals. I don't agree with that, but I definitely agree with the fact that it's bad for the society. Okay, so that's like a 50-50 one. You could agree partially and you can disagree partially as well. Okay, so I'll be doing those different types of questions in the upcoming lessons, but I just wanted you to kind of understand as to what do we mean by opinion essays and what kind of scope do we have when we're doing this type of essay. All right? Okay, so, and when we have a look at an example, right? Celebrities are role models and should behave well in public. You could agree, you could disagree. Okay, now if you say that you agree, you could say, well, they should, because you know they influence people, especially teenagers. Okay, so they should behave well and they should know what they're doing, right? And celebrities are always on the spotlight. Lots of people want to know what they're doing. Therefore, you know, behaving well in public is really important. The next one, young people need positive role models and therefore, you know, celebrities are kind of role models for most young people. So therefore, behaving well in public is important. And young people need to see that you can be very successful, right? As well as you can be a good person at the same time with some set of values within you. So therefore, you should behave well in public. Lastly, celebrities are needed to compensate for the lack of positive role models among politicians and business people, right? So therefore, if you don't act well, it doesn't look too good, right? Because they're role models, they're important people in society, okay? And their positive image is very important. However, you could disagree and say, well, we don't think so. Celebrities are there to entertain people and they don't really set a moral example, okay? Well, some stars only want to gain a lot of publicity and fame, so they would do anything. Okay, they would sell anything, they would do anything in society, in public to get what they want. Parents and teachers are very good celebrities and they should be their role models and not, parents and teachers are your role models and not celebrities. Okay, so we should teach our children that parents and teachers set examples and not celebrities who entertain people. Like everyone, you could disagree and say, like everyone, celebrities are also people. They could have shortcomings just like anyone else, and they could have wrong choices in life. And basically you could disagree and say, well, celebrities, don't ask them to worship them, right? They don't ask people to follow them, people follow them. So it's really a choice of the people and not their choice. You could disagree, okay? So now you could pick and choose whichever one you want to. But I'd like to point out something. Now, if they ask you, do you agree? It would be better for you to say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree, okay? Do you agree or disagree? Again, it would be nice to take one stance, okay? Not go, I agree a bit, I disagree a bit, okay? Because it would be hard for you to build up on your answer and logical structure because it's a marking criteria. But they ask you, do you want a cup of tea or coffee? You don't say, I want a bit of coffee and a bit of tea, right? You don't say that. So it's the same rule here. Do you agree or do you disagree? To what extent do you agree? Now that you could, argue 50-50 if you want to, or you could still take one extreme side and say, I completely agree, I completely disagree. Again, what is your opinion? So that's your personal one, so you can bring out your opinion. That again is, you could completely agree, completely disagree, or you could go 50-50. Okay, partially agree. Right, so that was a bit on character and people, right? Now, if you remember, character and people was an area which was here, right? So was this one here. So it's just an area, but the essay topic, as you can see, is celebrities are role models and should behave well in public, Do you agree? To what extent do you agree would be your essay question. Right, okay. So moving on, let's have a look at some collocations, okay? Just around the essay topic. I'd like you to quickly take a few minutes and pinpoint, or rather match the collocations, okay? Now, collocations, again, using collocations is a marking criteria in your writing task 2, and we discussed about that, right? So it would be nice for you to kind of do this. To gain what? To set what? To live with what? To achieve what? Okay? So take a few minutes, pause the video here and do it. So I hope you would have completed your answers by now. Let's have a look at the answers, right? To set a moral example, to live with integrity, to gain publicity, to exert an influence, and finally to achieve fame. Okay? Right, so these are some of the collocations you could use if you get a topic about celebrities. So like that, you could actually start practicing, okay? Take a topic, celebrities, what are the collocations? What are the words I could use, okay? Art, if there's a topic, what are the collocations I can use? What are the words that I can actually use? What are the linkers I can use in an essay, right? So when you come here, you can see spotlight, positive role, compassion, exert, okay? So exert and influence, okay? So those are things that you need to pick up, right? What else? To set a moral example, gain a lot of publicity, okay? Shortcomings is a nice word for you to use. So I'd like you to think about that aspect as well. It's not about just writing any essay, Okay, it's about building that practice before you start writing. Plan your answer. Okay, planning means to this extent, so you jot down the points. When you jot down the points, automatically the collocations would be there. Okay, and on the side, maybe you could think about the linkers and the other vocabulary that you would want to use, or rather the cohesive devices and the other words that you would want to use when you're writing your essay topic. If you plan to that extent, when you start writing, it will be quite easy, as well as it will help you to push your score up, right? So, moving on to the next set, discussion essays, right? Now, before we get into this bit, I'd like to touch on a specific part here. Now, when you say discussion essays, right, most of the time the essay question says discuss both views. It could stop there, or you could merge it with like an opinionated essay and say discuss both views and give your opinion. Now, when it comes to the discussion essay, there are two types. Around the same problem, you can talk about the two views, or you can talk about two separate views, right? Let me give you an example. Right, so if we have a look at an essay question like, some people think that healthcare should be given free, others disagree. Now, it's just around healthcare, okay? So the topic is healthcare. Some believe it should be free, some say no, it should not be given free. So it's the same question, both sides, okay? But there could be another type under discussion, right? Where, example, some people believe that urban space should be used more for parks, whereas the others believe it should be used for housing. Now, there are two different views. One set of people say, okay, we should use it for housing. Another set of people say, no, we should use it to build more parks. So, two different views. So, housing has its pros and cons, whereas parks has its, pros and cons, right? So, that's what you need to think about when you're doing discussion essays, okay? So, you need to discuss both views. So, be careful, is it the same two different views, or is it two different ones and then the views about it, okay? So, when we have a look at that, let's have a look at building and housing. The area is building and housing. Let's have a look at how you could put it to both sides, okay? So, should people actually rent or should people actually buy houses? Now, there are essay questions around this area, okay? So, you could jot down a few points. Renting is more economical in the short term, right? And people can easily downsize when money is short, okay? So, if you don't want to spend so much, you can go to a different place which has a less amount of rent to pay. People are not affected by changing the housing prices. People can relocate more easily when they want to or when they go to work in different places. And when the landlord is responsible for the maintenance, you're not really responsible. That is quite stress-free, okay? So you have pros and cons of renting, right? However, when you buy, you pay a mortgage, okay? And at the end, you are the owner and you have something of yours. Buying can be investment if the housing prices rise, okay? You can renovate, decorate, do whatever you want. It's your house. You don't need to ask anyone. Okay. No one can ask you to move and no one can put rules and regulations for you. And obviously the property becomes a reflection of your personal style. So you can really call it a home. When you rent, you know it's rented. So you don't put a lot of effort to make it nice and beautiful because you know someday you need to go, right? So you've got pros and cons in each of these two types, but it would be nice for you to kind of jot down the points and think about the collocations and the vocabulary that you could use. Right. So, complete these definitions with a suitable word from the sentences about renting or buying a house. A blank is money you borrow from a bank to buy a house. So, it is a mortgage. We don't say mortgage, we say mortgage. The T is silent, okay? But when you write it like that. A blank is someone who pays for the place they live in. So, have a look at it. Which is the word? You can pause the video here for some time. If people or businesses blank, they move to a different place. If you blank, you move to a smaller house or flat. Something that is blank is not too expensive so that you are able to buy it. Okay? So I'd like you to pause the video and go back and have a look at what are the words that you could use to fill in these gaps. Alright, so let's have a look at the answers, right? So a blank is someone who pays for the place they live in, right? So when you pay for where you live, you are called a tenant. And the person who owns the place is called a landlord, okay? But when you paid, you are a tenant. If people or businesses blank, they move to a different place, right? So basically, if they, relocate their work or anything that, they move from a place, right? We call it relocate, okay? So if, you change your place of work, and for an example, I go and work in Anuradhapura. I can't stay in Colombo and travel, so I would relocate to Anuradhapura, right? If you blank, you move to a smaller house or flat, okay? So, you can easily downsize, right? You could move to a smaller flat. Downsize is the word, okay? You can easily move to a different place that is not such a, it's not so big. You don't have to pay so much. You can move to a smaller place. Something that is not too expensive and you can afford it would be economical, okay? Economical. Right, okay, so moving on. Find the odd one out in each groups of the synonyms below, right? So there's one, which is the odd one. Which one is it? Rise, go up, climb, increase. Which is the odd one? Step. Cheap, affordable, thrifty, low cost. So cheap, affordable, low cost they all have the same meaning. Thrifty does not have the same meaning. It means you're really stingy, right? Spruce up, do up, decorate is to make it look good. Enrich does not mean that. Homeless, strapped for cash, stone broke, hard up. That means you're really hard in terms of money, okay? It does not mean that you don't have a home. All of these three words mean that you don't really have enough cash. You're tight with money. But homeless means you don't have a place to stay. So that is the odd one. Alright? Alright, so let's have a look at the next type of essay question, and that is problem solution essays, right? Now, before we come into these ideas, there could be different types of essays under problem solution. Number one, they could ask you the causes. Okay, what are the causes for this? Second one, what are the effects for this? Okay, because of this, what really happens? Next one, the solutions. How can you, come out of this problem? Okay, so you could ask them, there's a problem like this, what are the causes? Okay, there's a problem like this, what are the effects of it? Okay, there's a problem like this. How can you solve this problem? So they can ask you 3 different types of questions. Okay, so moving on to the problem solution style. Okay, they could ask you for the problem, they could talk about the solution. So example, the richest 1% own half of the world's wealth, while poorer people cannot even afford healthcare education. So what is the solution? Taxes on wealth. Okay, so that you take the money from the rich and you use it for the poorer people in the healthcare industry or the education sector. People leave poor countries to be educated in developed countries. So that's what happens mostly in developing countries, right? They leave the country and they all migrate to developed countries to get more education, for job opportunities, etc. Okay, so what could you do? Rich countries should offer training programs in poorer countries. So I know that, some countries actually come and set up the universities in developing countries, right? So I think there was like an idea before in Sri Lanka to do that, like an education hub, where you get different universities coming from around the world and they place their universities here. So students can actually come from around the world and get education, right? So I think Malaysia, Singapore, they do it really well. Singapore is, of course, a developed country now, right? So they do things like that, okay? Some people do not return to their own country after graduation, which can cause a brain drain, okay? So brain drain is where your human resources kind of go to a different country. Now, if you know, for an example, in Sri Lanka, we spend a lot of students come from the local schools or from the government funded schools, right? So if the government does not get anything back from them once they graduate, that is a huge investment. Okay, so you've educated someone, you've given them free education and you get 0 back in return. Okay, so brain drain is when they go to a different country, they say, okay, we're going for studies, and they don't come back, they find job opportunities and they stay there. Okay, so that could be a big problem for a country, which you can see happens quite a lot in Sri Lanka, right? So what should you do? People should agree to return to their country after education, which is very difficult. You can't put boundaries. But I know for a fact, because I teach doctors, I know for a fact when they go for foreign training, they do sign like a bond. So if they want to leave the government sector, they need to pay a huge amount of money, right? So they kind of make an agreement, they make sure that the trained doctors come back to Sri Lanka and serve in Sri Lanka, okay? So that's something the other sectors could think about, okay? But that is all for discussion, okay? Low wages cause many professionals in developing countries to migrate. That is a problem, okay? Because in developing countries, you don't get paid well, inflation is high, right? Cost of living becomes high. Lots of people start moving to developed countries, okay? And we don't have a minimum wage here in Sri Lanka, but I know that in the UK, we all have a minimum wage, okay? So no one can get paid below that wage, okay? But you can get obviously paid above that wage depending on your education, your skills, and exposure. So developing countries should provide more job incentives for educated people. Okay, that's what they could do. So if they're educated, if they have good knowledge, they've got good experience, maybe countries like Sri Lanka should think about paying their employees more if they're good at what they do, right? Poverty will increase in less developed countries, yes, because they become poorer and poorer, lots of people moving out, nothing in return for the country, so the country becomes poorer. More countries need to implement a proper minimum wage policy. So that's what I said, introducing a minimum wage is something that they could think about, okay? So I'm just giving ideas, I'm not into politics, okay? But these are ideas that you could really think about when you're writing an essay. But when you're doing that, bear in mind, don't be emotional. Don't bring out, personal examples only, right? So try to think with an open mind and think about good things that could, help as solutions. Because we're writing an essay, we're not here to change government or, implement policies in Sri Lanka. So we're writing an essay for an academic purpose. So make sure it's got a sound, set of problems and how you could sort out those problems, and that's it. Okay, so don't write extreme things, highly opinionated views. All right, so moving on, advantages and disadvantages style of essay. Now, before we come here, let us have a look at the different types as I've done before, right? Now here, they could ask you for the advantages as well as the disadvantages. So they could give you a statement and say, okay, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? Now let's take an example. Some people believe that students should take 1 year gap before they actually go to university. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? So that's one style, okay? Advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so they could ask you for that. The other one is outweigh. Now this is a bit difficult. I would say actually this is the most difficult style of essay out of all. Okay, so for an example, it is believed that the world would only have one language in future. Okay, do you think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Okay, so that is kind of like an opinionated essay, but you also have to touch on the positives as well as the negatives. So it's kind of a blended one. You've got to be careful when you're doing this kind of essay, right? So we'll be having a look at these type of essays when we're doing one by one each type more in detail. So coming here, we're going to talk about food, right? GM means genetically modified food. Now, so that means scientifically produced, okay? Now, for and against, what are the positives, what are the advantages, and what are the negatives or the disadvantages? Now, for means it's obviously cheaper, you get more crops, okay? And it means that it's good, okay? Through genetic modification foods, it could be given more flavor and better texture, okay? Crops can be made more resistant towards harmful insects as well as fungi. Genetically modified foods can be, given longer shelf life as well. And the nutritional value of it could be increased. However, these kind of products could be a threat to the environment because it's out of its normal way of doing things. Food production will become an industry dominated by a few companies which are powerful in biotech. And GM seeds will travel to neighboring fields that will threaten the non-GM crops, which is a problem, okay? And it will eventually affect our organisms adversely, so it's bad for our health, okay? And people prefer food that have not been tampered within laboratories. So we don't want to eat these things which have been genetically modified because we know in the long run it's not going to be good for our health, okay? So you can put down ideas for and against depending on your question or depending on your essay question and what they ask you. Right. Find words and phrases in the sentences above that mean damaging in a bad or unfavorable way. In the end, the taste of a food or drink, the way something feels in your mouth when you're eating it, okay? To interfere with something usually without permission. To make something bad or painful or more bearable. Okay, so I'd like you to go back, have a look at this and then come here and then complete one by one. So it would take a few minutes. So I'd like you to pause the video here, not go further, but go and find the words or the phrases that actually mean these words. Off you go. Right, so let's have a look at damaging, okay? Right, so damaging could be harmful. Okay, so we could write harmful here. Let's take, in the end, I saw words there, in the end would be eventually. Okay, so let's write eventually there. So in a bad or unfavorable manner would be a threat. Okay, would be a threat. So something that you feel in your mouth would be flavor. Okay, you could say flavor. The taste of a food or drink. Okay, so something that would taste some way would be flavor. So we could write flavor. So eating it would be, we could take it as texture. The flavor and a better texture, how it feels in your mouth. Okay. To interfere with something usually without permission is to, let's take tamper, okay, to tamper or tampered. To make something bad or painful more bearable, alleviate. We had that here, alleviate. So hopefully you've got those words there. All right. So moving on to the final type of question, okay, we call them direct questions, where they ask you a direct question. Now, example, lots of people spend money on their weddings. Why do they do that? Okay, question. How could they minimize their expenditure? A question. So they could ask you one direct question or maybe more than one. It depends on your essay question, okay? So, let's have a look at leisure, which is your area. Shopping as a leisure activity, okay? So they could ask you as to the reasons for popularity and what are the other activities that people could actually do, okay? So you could write words and phrases around it. Reasons for popularity is because it's been advertised on television as well as magazines, okay? And peer pressure, obviously. When someone is dressing in, coming with nice clothes, you want to do the same thing, okay? So peer pressure. People buy on impulse due to the atmosphere and background music in the shop. So sometimes we just walk in, we say, oh, let's just go around and see how it is. Nice, there's a nice shop. And you just get carried away. You want to kind of go in just to see, but at the end you just buy and come because everything seemed good. You like the environment, you like the colors, etc. Okay. So apart from that, people could actually do sport as a hobby. Okay. People can have the chance to, be more social and can improve their self-esteem. And, some interests such as photography, not photography, okay, photography, or, art can, really make you a creative person, okay. And recreation activities can make life more fulfilling than just going shopping, okay. So you could talk about, different aspects depending on the question that they ask you. All right. So there's more reasons for popularity and other activities. It would be that shopping malls obviously offer, all the facilities. You go in, you can drop your kids, they look after your kids, you can eat something, you can have some fun, and then you can buy stuff and come home. It's like a whole day, for fun activities. Even sometimes they have, a theater, or, you can watch a movie, okay? Some people find shopping very therapeutic, it's like a therapeutic, okay? So it's nice, you feel good, it's like a therapy. Credit cards have made it a lot more easier for people to go on a shopping spree. You don't have to have money. You have your credit card, which has, given a credit limit. So you can just go and buy whatever you want depending on your credit limit. If you do other activities rather than shopping, it would help you to discover more new skills, right? And there are some hobbies like chess which actually keep you focused, and it gives you more mentally, capacity for you to think, okay? Doing volunteer work is also nice, okay? It is more rewarding for you as an individual. And some pastimes can open up a whole new lifetime for people. So it's nice to do something different than going just on shopping, okay? All right. So find out the words and phrases in the sentences that above mean an unrestrained activity, sharp or clever, a sudden strong urge, fashions, and the ambience. Ambience is the surrounding, not ambience, okay? Ambience. Take a few minutes and have a look. Go back and see what are the words that you can find that would match these meanings. Okay, so hopefully you've completed this bit, okay? Let's have a look at the answers. So the first one is a recreational activity, astute, an impulse, trends the atmosphere. You don't really need to have a capital A. If you just write simple, that's more than enough, okay? All right, so with that, we have come to the end of the lesson, right? And what we did today was looking at the different types of essays. Now, you know that you have to write an essay, obviously, but what are the types of essays, okay? How can you jot down ideas? What kind of things should you focus? So you should focus on vocabulary. You should focus on writing collocations, good words, right? Depending on your essay topic. So it's good for you to look at the areas that I've just given so that you can start building up collocations, vocabulary, at least around these areas for a start. So with that, we come to the end of the lesson, which was all about the 5 different types of essays that would come up in your writing task 2.